How do everyone? Here is my second attempt, a bit more tidied up than my first, at using this PowerPoint to video equipment. And today's talk is about how a clear conscience makes for a comfy pillow. So it's really about sleep. It's about the importance of sleep. It's about the toxic effects of living in a 24/7 365 days a year environment in artificial circumstances. So that's what it's about, and as it says here, it's based on the research I'm doing. I don't know everything. I'm just trying to piece things together in a more simple way. And so what we've done here is we've tried to bring in what's called a tri-sync approach. We've tried to bring in three components and synchronize them to give this sort of central core of how things all interact with one another and cause us to be either peaceful in ourselves, or if we don't get these right and they're not actually working together, then it would call what they use now cognitive dissonance. That means your head's battered and you can't just get rest. It's almost like a chronic inability to rest and recuperate. So we'll look at the architecture of the psychological unease or dis-ease or being ill at ease. We look at what happens when we get emotionally triggered, the response that happens in our physical body, then the cognitive loop. All that means is they're going round and round and round with different sorts of resentments, and how this affects the way we feel about ourselves, really. And this causes us to, even though we're physically exhausted, when we go to bed and put our head on the pillow, round and round and round and round it goes, a million miles an hour. Should have done this, will do this, blah de blah de blah. So it's how can we actually, first of all, stop that process, and then how can we deal with the things that are emerging mostly from our unconsciousness. And again, there's so much stuff buried in our unconscious or subconscious minds that when we try and relax, it'll jump up to have a go at us, really. And this is the problem. There's such a lot of buried, suppressed and repressed materials in our unconscious minds, that the best way to clear a passage or a pathway for more light to get in, to expel these things, is to bring them out into the open as best we can. And we do this first of all by forgiving ourselves when we look backwards. We try and suggest what we might do now instead of what we did then, because at the time we worked with the resources and the situations and our coping strategies that were best for us at that time, but clearly they're maybe not working now. So how can we expunge them and almost exorcise them? And that will then release the burden of the past. It will clear more space in our neurological gateways, and then it will help us to get more restful, both non-REM and REM sleep, in line with our biorhythms. And so we'll get better emotional regulation and clearer minded thinking. So we choose quality choices rather than defensive and fearful choices. And is my past going to catch up with me? All those things. So conscientiousness, really, I suppose it's about making space in a mindful way, so rather than emotional react, we can actually feel the trigger, and rather than go immediately to try and find something to quell the emotional disturbance, is we can almost let go and become more objective about our subjective emotional responses. That's a bit of a posh way for saying it. We can take a step back and almost put ourselves into the audience of our own life and just run through these frames one by one to see what needs to be done next if this situation arises or a similar situation. So, we can time our going to sleep or going to bed. We can make that really clear and go earlier in order to try and wake up a bit earlier as well, and take benefit of the dawn phenomenon, you know. So we can increase the length of our sleep as we get better, and with having more sleep we get greater resilience. We can handle these emotional ups and downs much more readily, and basically the quality of our life improves. But we need to clean up our own act. And you know, we talk about moral and philosophical convictions galore. By moral, what I mean by moral is, are we in alignment with our deepest core values, the core values that work for us, those beneficial, harmless, kind, considerate and conscientious choices that not only benefit ourselves but basically benefit everybody around us and everybody that we meet. Can we leave, you know, that one, can we leave a person feeling better before they met us, you know, because I think that happens. You know, people regard us in a better light, and we're seen as helpful rather than harmful or horrible people, you know. And we do this by, first of all, forgiving ourselves at depth for the things that we've gone through, making amends wherever possible, and then that immediately starts to make us feel better and feel more coherent, and then our physiology changes, and the brain waves then are influenced by how the heart's working. This is really what entrainment and cardiac coherence is all about. More will be said on those things in the future. So neurological recalibration, all that means is clearing the way, creating new positive pathways, and basically this all starts with trying to get our sleep in order, because the toxic environment we live in, the artificial lighting, the constant bombardment with toxic chemicals in our food, in our shampoo and in our detergents, you know, in the things that we drink, especially fluorine and chlorine, or fluoride and chloride in the water. You know, I was only thinking today, it's just insanity, isn't it, that we get tap water and we have to filter it then to take out all the stuff that they're putting in it, and that's costing us money, you know, all these sorts of different things. So the world's bonkers, isn't it, really? But we have to start somewhere, so best to start cleaning up our own act, you know, and working from there. And what I've found is that as we change, other people who watch us, they sometimes come along and say, you seem to have changed a lot, you're much more healthy now, you seem a lot happier, you seem that you have a lot more energy than you used to. How do you do that? And so just give them the principles of being seriously light-hearted, and rather than pointing the finger outside, you know, when there's always three fingers coming back, rather than being in that victim consciousness, it's basically clean our own act up from inside out and from the ground up, really. And that's what I've found, you know. And as we do these PowerPoint presentations more and more, and I'll try and do short, sharp shocks, really, to try and help you to take actions to reset your nervous system, neurological calibration. You know, and we move out of this vicious circle of disease, sickness, anger, resentment, frustration, impatience, all those vicious sort of emotions, into what they call the virtual circle of rest and integrity. So we move more out of the fight and flight response, which is technically called the defense arousal response, and we move more and more to the rest and digest response. Problem with the rest and digest response is sometimes we can go the wrong way, and we can eat too much food in order to rest and digest, and then that can cause all sorts of problems. So this is not about resting and digesting and recuperating all the time. It's getting a balance between being driven, right, and doing the driving, really. So And the other thing is, so we reduce guilt by seeing our part in situations and going along and saying to people directly if possible, look, I've seen the error of my ways and I apologize if I've hurt you in any way. If there's any way, that I can help to reset the balance, please let me know. And in that way, we take the barb out of our own bellies, right? And we just let go of that. And what tends to happen then, also I've found from my own experiences, that a new influx of energy comes in as we forgive ourselves for the things that we've done in the past, and we need to talk these things through, with somebody who's been through the process and say, look, I'm thinking of doing this, because, solitary self-appraisal seldom suffices. And what that means is we might get a good idea and go and take an action, but it actually may cause more harm than good. So talk it through with somebody that you can trust, and work from the heart and discern from the heart, and not what your stinking thinking head tells you. And this is something that you learn over time. You'll make mistakes, but once again, if you say, look, I've made a mistake and I'm really, really sorry, if you're sincere about it, then no problem. More and more energy flows in, you get more vitality, you start to sleep better. Then we've got less rumination. Rumination just means going over and over and over and over situations, and we get improved sleep, and we then can regulate our emotions better in the daytime as well. So we need to find a way that suits us. Not all things work for all people. Different practices work for different people. But my go-to would be something called mindfulness. And mindfulness really is when thoughts come up that cause an emotional disturbance, is to sit with the disturbance. It's not to immediately try and quell the disturbance by suppressing and repressing or eating something or having a drink or taking a tablet. It's to sit with the discomfort and just sit in the middle of it until it almost miraculously dissolves away. Or it will clearly show you of an action that needs to be taken, and when you take the action, then they dissolve away as well. So, this is not about what they call doctrinal orthodoxy, meaning there's no set standard, that things will emerge on a daily basis, almost sent to you in a sequence from your deeper inner resourcefulness or your innate intelligence. So it might be better focusing on a feeling first that emerges from deep within, and then taking an action. And if you get a grip in the gut because you're afraid, right, that's a good sign. It just means that you have to do it. And then that will lead to more open, flowing joyfulness, joyfulness. So these things don't happen overnight. They need practice, like everything else. So things like Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga and gentle jogging and dancing and wild water swimming or cold water dipping, all these things will help to reset your nervous system to an optimal level for you. And that might be a different vibration or a different frequency from somebody else. So don't compare yourself to others. By all means, listen to all the information that comes in. But in the end, find out what works for you and do more of it. And above all, do no harm, as Hippocrates is reputed to have said. Yeah, so creating psychological space for the light to shine through. And this just means, really, this is my understanding of a spiritual pathway or following a spiritual line. It just means that you feel that your life's got purpose, that there's work that you can do in order to clear more space, in order to let this light and this joyful feeling shine through you, basically. I think that's what this is about. So it's aligning actually with your soul's purpose, and that's not a religious thing. It's just the way I explain that I've found that there's deep values within us that are basically trying to break through all the nonsense that we've burdened ourselves down with. So this is releasing ourselves from the bondage of the past. So what happens when we put all these things together? We feel better. We've got more vitality. We've got more flowing V medicatrix naturae. That's the healing life force, sometimes called chi, sometimes called ki or prana or elan vital. All sorts of different names for the same thing. Is basically joy. Our thinking, cognitive function improves, and we can actually prevent burnout because we're not burning energy so foolishly and therefore becoming exhausted. So, redefining the pillow as a place of spiritual surrender. Yep, it's just about letting go of everything to know that there's stuff emerging from the depth of us, that if we listen to that still small voice and take actions based upon its guidance, then the world through you will become a better place. And I'm absolutely convinced that if we all start to do this, things will start turning around. And it doesn't mean to say put up with nonsense. By all means, if someone's having a go at you, by all means defend yourself, but understand that they're coming from a place that we used to be at too.